It isn't shyness. That's the first thing you have to let go of. The person in your mind right now, the one whose profile picture is a shadow on a wall, a stretch of ocean, a cup of coffee, anything except their own face, they aren't hiding because they're afraid of how they look. The truth is stranger and quieter than that. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it in people you've known for years. Roughly 1 or 2 out of every 100 move through the world this way. In the language of personality psychology, they're called INFJs, statistically the rarest type there is. They're the watchers, the listeners, the friend who remembers the one thing you said in passing 3 months ago, the thing you've already forgotten saying. And of all the small habits that give them away, none says more than the empty space where a face should be. So why do they leave it empty? Picture an INFJ holding their phone, thumb hovering over a photo of themselves. For most people, this moment carries a flicker of vanity, a flash of insecurity, and then they post anyway. The INFJ feels something different. A kind of resistance, low and certain, like a door easing shut on its own. Because to them, the image isn't a photo, it's a verdict. A single picture freezes one version of a person and hands it to strangers as the whole truth. The smile becomes who they are. The angle becomes their character. The bad lighting becomes a confession. And the INFJ, who lives almost entirely inside a vast, moving inner world that no camera has ever once captured, feels the gap between that flat little rectangle and everything they actually are. The photo isn't them. It's a rumor about them, and they would rather say nothing at all than let a rumor speak first. Notice the strange exception in this. The same person who won't post a selfie will write you a message 3 paragraphs long. They'll pour themselves into words at 2 in the morning, careful and exact, choosing each one. Words they can control. Words they can shape until the meaning is precise. But a face gives them no such mercy. A face is read in 1/4 of a second by someone who isn't even paying attention. And there's nothing they can do to guide what that stranger decides. So they stay in the medium they trust, and they leave the lens turned off. Ask one of them about the rare time they did post a photo, and you'll hear the same story with different details. There was a birthday, or a graduation, or a hand on their shoulder that made it feel safe for one evening. They posted the picture, and within an hour, something turned. They found themselves checking who had seen it, rereading their own caption as a stranger might, feeling that low hum of exposure spread under their skin until the only thing that quieted it was the small gray button that said, delete. Most people post and forget. The INFJ posts and then spends the night negotiating with a feeling they can't name, and learns one more time that the comfort of the lens turned off was worth more than the photo ever was. This is the part outsiders always misread. They assume the silence means there's nothing behind it, or something shameful. The opposite is true. There's too much behind it. The INFJ isn't protecting a flaw. They're protecting a depth they've never quite found the words for, and they know, instinctively, almost painfully, that an image will flatten it into something it isn't. But there's a second layer underneath that one, and it has nothing to do with how they're seen. It has to do with who gets to do the seeing. Watch an INFJ in a room full of people. They drift to the edges. They ask the questions instead of answering them. They notice who's gone quiet, who's drinking too fast, who laughed half a second too late, usually before those people notice it in themselves. This isn't an accident of mood. It's a position they've chosen. The INFJ is the observer, the one who sees without being seen. It's where they feel safe, and it's where they do their best work on the world. From the quiet edge of the room, reading everything. And the moment they post their own face into the open, that position collapses. Suddenly, they're the one on the wall, the one being watched, scrolled past, read, decided about by people who will never put in the work to read them correctly. For someone whose entire sense of safety is built on watching rather than being watched, that exposure doesn't feel like sharing. It feels like surrender. And there's a cost to being perceived that most people simply never feel. INFJs are unusually porous. They absorb the moods of the people around them, often without consent and almost always without relief. They walk out of a tense room still carrying tension that was never theirs to begin with. Every interaction draws something out of them. So imagine what it means to broadcast your face to hundreds of people at once. Each like, each comment, each silent viewer who never says a word becomes a thread of attention pulling gently at them. For an extrovert, that pull is fuel. It lights them up. For the INFJ, it's a slow drain they can feel somewhere in the chest. The empty profile, then, isn't avoidance. It's defense. It's a person quietly refusing to hand out 1,000 small pieces of themselves to people who don't even realize they're taking them. By now, you might think you understand it. Privacy, depth, a nervous system that bruises easily. But there's one more thing beneath all of it. The thing the title promised. The thing they're really hiding. And it's the hardest one to admit out loud. What the INFJ is hiding is a quiet, almost unreasonable longing to be known completely. Here is the contradiction that runs straight through the center of them. They refuse the small, easy version of being seen, the photo, the caption, the surface, precisely because they ache for the enormous total version to be understood all the way down by someone willing to actually go there. A picture offers the cheap version of connection, recognition without understanding, being looked at instead of being known. And to a person quietly starving for the real thing, the cheap version doesn't tempt them. It almost offends them. So they wait. They keep the door closed, not because the room behind it is empty, but because it holds everything. And they have learned, the hard way, and more than once, that most people knock without ever meaning to come inside. You may have heard of what people call the INFJ door slam, the way they can cut someone out of their life suddenly and completely, with no warning and no road back. From the outside, it looks cold, even cruel. From the inside, it's the last move of someone who once handed over more of their hidden self than they show anyone, and then felt it handled carelessly. The blank profile and the slammed door are the same instinct at different volumes. Both are a person guarding something that costs them far more than anyone realizes to open. And this is why the missing photo matters more than it looks. It isn't a quirk. It's an entire philosophy of human contact compressed into one small telling absence. It says, I will not perform myself for people who only want the trailer. If you want me, come closer, slow down, ask the question hiding under the question you actually asked. Stay long enough that a face becomes the least interesting thing you know about me. There's a strange dignity in that, once you finally see it. In a world that begs to be looked at, that measures worth in visibility, that treats the unphotographed life as a life only half lived, the INFJ makes the opposite bet. They wager that the deepest things were never meant to be put on display, that some part of a person should stay unsearchable. That being a little bit unknown isn't a failure to connect, but the actual price of connecting for real. So the next time you scroll past that shadowed profile, the landscape, the coffee cup, the figure turned away where a face should be, Don't read it as hiding. Read it as a door, closed, but never quite locked. There's someone behind it who sees more than they say and feels far more than they show, waiting. Not for an audience, but for the one person patient enough to actually knock. And maybe that makes you think about the quiet ones in your own life, the watchers, the ones who notice everything and reveal almost nothing. What do you think they're really protecting back there? And if it were you standing at that door, would you even know how to knock? Sit with that one. The answer says more about you than about them. Because the face was never the thing being hidden. The face was only ever the lock. What's behind it is the entire reason they've kept it closed.